My name is Elena Vaughn. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, currently stationed at Fort Meade. But today, none of that mattered. Today, I was just the daughter who showed up. The chapel smelled like lilies and old polish, heavy with a kind of ceremonial grief that didn't belong to me. It was my father's funeral, but the room had been choreographed down to the last candle by my sister, Madeline. She floated from one conversation to the next, shaking hands, offering dabs of tears, and stealing glances at the photographers she'd quietly arranged to be there. I stayed near the back, not by choice, but because that was where she wanted me. Her world was full of angles and attention, and I didn't fit the aesthetic. Combat boots and classified missions didn't play well against her narrative of the grieving socialite. People kept whispering. Some glanced my way with polite confusion, as if trying to remember whether I was the niece or the estranged friend. One woman approached, squeezing my hand gently before saying, "I didn't realize General Vaughn had another daughter." She smiled like she'd offered a compliment. I nodded, said nothing, and let her walk away. I wasn't offended. I was used to it. At family functions, I was the blurry figure in the background of photos, the one who left early or didn't show at all. Duty calls was always my excuse, but the truth was simpler. There was never room for me at the table unless Madeline said so. She was radiant as ever, dressed in black silk, hair pulled into the kind of effortless chignon that takes a stylist an hour to perfect. Every hug she gave felt rehearsed. Every tear, perfectly placed. From across the room, she looked at me like I was interrupting something important. I knew that look. I'd seen it my whole life. It said, "Stay quiet. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't ruin the moment I created." That moment just happened to be our father's funeral. There was no warmth in the air, no real mourning, just cold politics wrapped in soft music and floral arrangements. I looked around and felt like a ghost at my own family's gathering, unseen, misplaced, irrelevant. But I wasn't here to be seen. I was here because something had shifted, because this time I didn't come as the forgotten daughter or the quiet soldier. I came as someone who had spent the last 18 years reading people like maps and anticipating threats before they surfaced. And from the moment I walked in, I knew exactly what Madeline was planning. She didn't want a goodbye. She wanted a performance. And she thought I'd stay quiet like always. What she didn't know was that I hadn't come alone, and the moment she made her move, I'd make mine. Quietly, decisively, like any good soldier, taught to strike only when the target reveals itself. I can still remember the exact sound of my father's voice when he toasted Madeline at her 35th birthday dinner. We were in the private room of some upscale steakhouse she had picked, surrounded by old money, polished wood, and people who thought influence came in the form of dinner reservations and Instagram photos. My father raised his glass high and said, "To my daughter, a true force in this world, a builder, a winner." Everyone clapped. Madeline beamed. I took a sip of water and said nothing. I'd just returned from a 6-month deployment and wasn't even sure why I'd come to that dinner, except maybe for some misplaced sense of hope. I thought, just once, maybe he'd see me for who I was. When the applause died down, I quietly mentioned I'd been selected for a strategic command position. It was a big deal. My father looked over, nodded slowly, and said, "Good for you. Still in uniform, huh?" Then he turned back to Madeline and asked about her next real estate development. That was how it always went. My life didn't fit the frame he built for success. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with cocktail parties or magazine spreads. It came with scars, field briefings, and more silent victories than anyone in that room could have ever understood. Madeline had always been his mirror. Beautiful, loud, perfectly packaged. She wore ambition like perfume, strong enough to make a statement the second she entered a room. And he adored her for it. Every business deal she closed, every award she posted online, he treated like proof he'd done something right as a father. Me? I was the daughter he never quite knew what to do with. He used to joke that I was playing soldier, even after I'd made lieutenant colonel. When I got a commendation for a classified op, I told him over the phone. He said, "Well, I hope they at least paid you overtime." He didn't mean to be cruel. That was the hardest part. He truly believed success looked a certain way, and I just didn't fit it. In his eyes, I was respectable, but irrelevant, decorated, but dull. Madeline saw it too, and she used it. Every chance she got, she reminded me of how small I looked next to her. Once, at a family barbecue, she laughed and said, "Elena brings guns to parties, I bring contracts. Guess who Dad brags about more?" Everyone laughed. I smiled. But inside, I remembered every time I'd chosen silence over pride, every promotion I didn't celebrate with them, every operation I couldn't talk about. I had built a life in the shadows, and they only respected light. It wasn't about jealousy. I didn't want what she had. I just wanted them to see the weight I carried. To understand that while Madeline was closing deals, I was planning rescues, gathering intel, preventing wars. Quietly, precisely, without fanfare. But in my father's world, quiet wasn't strength. It was weakness. And the longer I lived in that divide, the deeper it cut. By the time he passed, I had stopped waiting for recognition. I didn't come to the funeral to prove anything to him. He was gone. But Madeline? She was still performing, still playing queen. And for once, I wasn't going to let her run the show without interruption. Not because I needed her validation, but because some legacies deserve to be challenged, especially when they were built on blind spots. There's a room deep inside Fort Meade that doesn't have windows. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, the air is filtered, and every surface is built for function. No luxury, no applause. Just mission briefings, encrypted channels, and people who understand that silence often speaks louder than words. That's where I come alive. I don't need to explain myself here. My rank, my record, and my results speak for me. Around the table sit operators from Tier 1 units, hardened men with eyes that have seen things the world will never know. They don't care about family names or public image. They care about survival, precision, execution, and they trust me to guide them. I remember one briefing in particular. The target was embedded in a civilian-dense zone. The plan needed to be surgical. Risk mitigation had to be exact. I stood at the head of the table, laser pointer in hand, and walked them through the strategy. My voice didn't shake. It never does in that room. I said, "We use his own arrogance against him. He's not hiding. He's taunting. Let him believe we're 2 steps behind." I looked at the screen, then back at the team. "You are the kinetic element. I am the mind behind the curtain. We don't miss. Not here, not now." They nodded. No one interrupted. No one second-guessed. That's what respect feels like when it's earned. Not handed out at a birthday dinner. Not wrapped in champagne toasts or empty applause. Just clear, solid belief in your competence. Captain Reyes, who's run more operations than I can count, gave me a short nod when the briefing ended. "We move on your word, ma'am." That's all he said. That's all I needed. In this world, I'm not the disappointing daughter. I'm not the quiet one in the corner. I'm the strategist they bring in when the mission can't fail. The one they trust with their lives because they know I've earned every inch of ground I stand on. There's no room for performance here. No space for ego. In this room, you're either right or you're deadly wrong. And I've built my credibility over years of getting it right. When the mission launched, I stayed in the command center, watching the feed, listening to the comms, adjusting the plan in real time. My voice came through their earpieces like a compass, steady, unshaken. The enemy didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late. Back home, no one knew. My father never asked what I did. My sister never cared. And I stopped explaining long ago. But inside these walls, every detail matters. Every insight is valued. And every win is shared, quietly, among people who understand that glory means nothing if the job isn't done right. Here, I am whole. Not because anyone handed me that feeling, but because I forged it. out of discipline, out of clarity, out of knowing who I am when no one's watching. They may call Madeline a success, but here, in this world, I'm the one they follow into the dark, and that's a legacy no amount of applause can buy. Madeline was always beautiful, the kind of beauty that walks into a room and rearranges the energy without saying a word. People called it elegance. I called it calculation. She knew how to cry without ruining her makeup, how to tilt her head just enough to seem sincere, how to spin pain into attention, tragedy into leverage. And today, in that funeral hall, she was in full performance mode grief, tailored to fit like a designer dress. To the mourners, she was the grieving daughter, holding the family together. To me, she was the same woman who once laughed at my promotion and asked if the army gave out bonuses for paperwork. Her disdain was always hidden under silk and smiles, but I knew where to look. She circled me that day like a hawk in heels. Her phone, clutched casually in her hand, looked like she was scrolling condolences, but I caught the angle more than once. She was recording me, waiting, hoping I'd flinch, cry, break, anything she could twist into weakness. It wasn't just petty, it was strategic. The will hadn't been read yet, but Madeline was already moving pieces. She wanted proof. Something to show the lawyers that I was too unstable, too fragile, too detached to handle what our father had left behind. She wasn't just grieving, she was building a case. She always did that, smiled in your face while lining up the shot behind your back. Every compliment was a setup, every hug a disguise. She didn't want to beat me in private, she wanted to win in public. But she'd forgotten one thing. I wasn't a teenage girl anymore, looking for approval. I was a soldier trained to see threats before they moved. And as she watched me through her phone lens, convinced she had control, she missed the most important detail. I was already watching her first. I made the call at 2:47, not because I couldn't sleep, but because that was the hour I did my clearest thinking. The line was secure. The voice that answered was calm, direct, and already awake. "Vaughn," he said. "What's the target? Domestic? Psychological?" I replied. "Non-lethal, but visible. I need presence, not pressure." He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. We'd served together long enough. Trust wasn't a question. I laid out the parameters. Civilian clothing, dispersed seating, no insignia, no comms. Their job wasn't to intervene. It was to exist. Quietly, strategically. They would be my deterrent. A living message. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about shifting power. About reclaiming control in a space where I had always been made to feel small. And this time, I wasn't asking for permission. I was activating an asset. His voice came back low but certain. "We'll be there. 12 of them. You'll have full eyes on all entry and exit points. Signal on your mark." I didn't say thank you. He didn't expect it. I ended the call, opened my laptop, and started working. I pulled up the funeral home's blueprint. I'd downloaded it 3 days earlier. The building was standard. Single hall, 4 access points, 2 private rooms. The foyer had wide sightlines. No obstructions. I marked positions for each operative based on visibility, egress routes, and psychological effect. Then I mapped the audience. My sister would want the center aisle. Front row, high visibility. I placed 2 team members behind her, 2 at the rear, and the rest along the perimeter. They would blend in, friends of the family, former colleagues. Unremarkable at first glance. But when the signal came, they'd rise, synchronized, silent, absolute. The plan had no aggression, no threat, just presence. I didn't need them to speak. I needed them to be seen. When I finished, I reviewed the placements twice. Every angle accounted for. Every reaction predicted. It felt like prepping a battlefield. The only difference was, The terrain wasn't hostile. It was personal. Madeline thought she was setting the stage for a quiet takedown, a recorded reaction, a breakdown she could present as evidence. What she didn't know was that I wasn't walking into her trap. She was walking into mine. I didn't want drama. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted the unspoken hierarchy of our family crafted through whispers and manipulation to collapse under the weight of something she couldn't fake: discipline, order, power that didn't perform, only existed. At 5:12, I sent the final confirmation. One word: Raven. I. It wasn't just a code name, it was a signal. The mission had begun. The vibration in my palm was brief, just 2 pulses. Leo's message was simple: "She's recording you." I already knew. That was the cue, the confirmation I had been waiting for. No hesitation, no second thoughts. My thumb hovered for half a breath, then tapped a single word: Raven. I lowered the phone slowly, almost ceremonially, and began to scan the room. My face held the same expression I had maintained all morning: measured grief, quiet presence. But inside, the shift had begun. The moment was in motion. Leo stood first. He didn't speak. He didn't move dramatically. He just rose, full height, still as stone, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Not on me, not on Madeline, just forward, calm, controlled. Then, across the aisle, another man stood. Then a third, by the stained glass window. Then one more, by the exit. Within seconds, 12 men had risen in perfect sync. Their suits were dark, their stances uniform, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind their backs. No weapons, no insignia, just presence. The air changed. People stopped breathing. The officiant paused mid-sentence, voice trailing into silence. A ripple moved through the pews like a wave of static. Heads turned, mouths opened, but no one spoke. All eyes found them. Then, like magnets, turned to me. That was the moment. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just met their stares and held them. I became the center of gravity. Not the photo of my father. Not the woman giving the eulogy. Me. Madeline's head whipped around, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Her confident smirk collapsed. Her fingers tightened on her phone, then slipped. It hit the marble floor with a sharp crack that echoed louder than any voice in the room. She bent down slowly, but her eyes never left mine. Horror widened them. Realization set in. She had no idea what was happening. She didn't know who these men were, but she knew instinctively they weren't here for her. I watched her lips part. No sound came out. Her brain was racing to catch up, to spin this, to control the moment. But it was already gone. She looked toward our mother, and there it was. That final blow. Our mother, always the peacekeeper, always trying to excuse Madeline's cruelty with phrases like, "You know how she is," was staring at me, not in confusion, in revelation, like she was seeing me for the first time. And I didn't look away. I let her see it, the control, the quiet power, the truth. This wasn't about drama. This wasn't vengeance. This was a reset. Then Leo took 2 steps and stood beside me. Close, but not touching. His presence was deliberate, protective, public. His voice was steady. "We're here to honor a patriot's family." He didn't have to say more. Everyone understood. The daughter, who had been invisible, quiet, dismissed, was suddenly the one surrounded by warriors. And not just any warriors. These were Tier 1 men. Men who followed orders from no one but the very top. And they stood with me. The tension broke, not with noise, but with silence. A silence so dense it felt like gravity. Madeline sat back, stunned. My mother lowered her eyes. It was done. One word. 12 men. And a lifetime of being underestimated collapsed under the weight of reality. The service ended. Not with a hymn or a warm farewell, but with murmurs. Low, urgent whispers filled the space where condolences used to live. People avoided eye contact with Madeline. They glanced at her like she'd become something they no longer recognized. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just sat there, stunned and small. Her spotlight had dimmed, and no one rushed to relight it. My mother stood nearby, her arms folded across her body like armor. She didn't look at me, but she didn't look at Madeline either. She just stared ahead, lips pressed tight, as if finally understanding that silence could no longer protect the wrong daughter. I turned to leave, but I didn't get far. One by one, men stepped forward. Not friends of the family, not neighbors, military, retired generals, active duty commanders, quiet professionals I'd briefed in classified rooms across the world. They shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye. "Your father never told us," one said. "He should have." Another nodded. "You did more than serve. You led." There was no ceremony in their voices, just truth. They weren't here to flatter. They were here because they knew what it meant to earn respect without asking for it. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just nodded, grateful, steady, whole. I didn't need my father to say he was proud. I no longer craved it. His world never made space for mine, and that was okay. I had built my own. And in that world, I didn't have to prove anything. As I walked toward the exit, I passed Madeline. She looked up, her face a mixture of disbelief and something I couldn't quite place, fear, maybe. Or finally, clarity. I didn't slow down. She had spent her life trying to shrink me, but I had found a version of myself she couldn't touch, a version that didn't need applause, only purpose. Outside, the air was clean, light, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was walking toward peace. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who stand with you when the room turns silent, the ones who don't need you to explain, who never ask you to shrink, who simply show up when it matters. That day at the memorial, I didn't just reclaim my voice, I realized who my real family was. And they weren't tied to me by last name. They were tied to me by trust, by loyalty, by the quiet understanding that respect is earned in actions, not titles. I used to think I had to prove myself to be loved, to be seen. But the truth is, you don't have to chase love where it's not given freely. You deserve to stand where you're valued, not just tolerated. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever been called too quiet, too different, or not enough, you're not alone. We've all been underestimated by someone, but that doesn't define your worth. What defines it is who shows up when the world's watching. So tell me, have you ever had to find your strength when your family refused to see it? Share your story in the comments. This space is for you, because here, we don't measure people by where they came from. We measure them by what they've survived and who they've become.